The agenda for the webinar is the following. First, we'll be talking about what is innovation and whether innovation can be managed. The second item would be role of hackathons in enterprise innovation. The third item would be leveraging hackathon-based innovation campaigns. And then finally, we'll end with what it takes to conduct a successful hackathon. The entire webinar is, these 4 points are kind of assimilated in the entire webinar. So I'll be jumping over from one point to the other in the flow. So if you look at any process around management, when it comes to product development, whether it's about managing a team, whether it's about finances, almost every function in a business can be managed. But when we talk about innovation, we inherently feel that innovation as a process, innovation is something that cannot be managed. Now, why is that something like innovation is restricted to a few set of people, or it is considered to be something that can only be done by a select set of people within the business? Is innovation not something that everyone can contribute to? We believe that innovation is innovation is a process that is driven by the masses. It is something that everybody can contribute to. But before we can understand that, we need to understand that what is innovation. So the definition of innovation can be summarized as combining novelty with commercialization. It is essentially the ability of an organization to commercialize novel or new concepts. And that's where the whole concept of innovation actually differs from the process of invention or filing patents. Because commercialization of the innovative technique or the novel concept is a critical element for something to become innovation. If you look at organizations across the globe, something very interesting is going to come out. The companies that have filed the maximum number of patents, or the companies who spend the maximum on their R&D process, are unfortunately not the most innovative companies globally. Apple and Google are the two most innovative companies in the world, and both of them have far less patents as compared to the companies like IBM, and their spend on R&D is significantly lesser than some of the much larger enterprises. So the ability to commercialize a novel concept is equally important, if not more, to be innovative. What that means is, if you look at innovation management as a concept, we've got two entities at play. The first is the business, and the second is the employees. The role of a business is to create an environment, is to foster an environment where people can constantly ideate, where people can contribute to creative thought. And when I say people, I'm referring to the employees of the business, partners, the whole ecosystem in which a business exists. Within this framework, the role of an employee or role of an individual is to come up with creative ideation. So business provides the context, it provides the environment, it provides the framework and the tools by which individuals can ideate. And what flows out of those ideas, what flows out of that innovation or those novel concepts is the ability of a business to select the right ideas and take them to commercialization. This, in a nutshell, is the process of innovation management. The ideation happens bottoms up, but the selection and commercialization of the ideas or the novel concepts happen at an organization level. So there's both a business and organization which is in play, and individuals who are responsible for the ideation. If you look at ideation, innovation as a process, there are essentially 3 steps or 3 stages of innovation. The first is discovery, and that's where the role of business comes in. Discovery is essentially about defining or understanding the key challenges or the key opportunities that a business cares about. For example, for a company like Uber, self-driving cars is one of the biggest threat, and it can also be termed as an opportunity. But something like self-driving cars is not necessarily a threat or an opportunity for a company that is in the e-commerce space, let's say for an Amazon. Unless Amazon decides to go into the transportation business, there is no direct threat or opportunity that arises out of self-driving cars for a company like Amazon. But it is very critical for a company like Uber. And this, what I just spoke about, the process of understanding what are the major threats or opportunities for a business, not in the short term, but in the long term. And when I say long term, I'm talking about at least 5 to 10 years. So in that time frame, what are the key opportunities or threats that a business should be preparing themselves for is essentially the process of discovery. The process of discovery, as you can understand, it is top down. It typically happens in the key management layer, where a management decides that these are the things that we need to care about as a business. And these are the domains, or these are the places where we need to be innovative. The second process, or the second step of innovation as a process, is ideation. Ideation is where you essentially understand the key business discovery, and then you come up with a lot of ideas, a lot of proof of concepts that come up with novel concepts within that larger frame of problem statement that the business has discovered. Ideation, as you can understand, is essentially a bottoms-up process. So discovery is a top-down process, and ideation is a bottoms-up process. The other thing about ideation and innovation in general is that quantity trumps over quality. So this may sound a bit contrary, but it is not possible to put a lot of constraints around innovation and then expect someone to come up with the best idea that can go into the business and create an innovative solution for the customers. For innovation to happen, you need to let serendipity happen. And that what essentially that translates into is that ideation has to be as broad as possible. Ideation has to happen across as many people as possible. And a large business, a thriving business, typically has a large pool of individuals that it can leverage for its ideation. This pool is essentially its employees, its customers, and its partners. So once the discovery is done, once a business has identified the key challenges and opportunities, it needs to create an environment where first it communicates or articulates the discovery to its individuals, to those individuals who are going to contribute to the ideation. And secondly, it creates an environment in which any individual who's related to that business can ideate. What's even more interesting is that these individuals can also be outside the immediate ecosystem of the business. So in addition to the employees and the partners and the customers, even common consumers who may be consumers of the products built by that company or services delivered by the company, or people who just in general are associated with the space or the domain in which the business operates, can also contribute to ideation. And this is outward-looking ideation. Whereas a large chunk of ideation happens inward-looking, there's also an element of an outward-facing ideation. And the third step is, once the business has identified a large pool of ideas, selecting the right set of ideas, converting those ideas into proof of concepts, and then eventually integrating those projects, those concepts within the core business offering. And that's where the execution comes in. So execution typically happens in the traditional product development manner, where once you have identified what is the problem that we're solving, you have a proof of concept, you have a theory around how it is to be solved, it goes back and assimilates with the core business product development process of the business and eventually is rolled out to the end customers. So this as a whole is the process of innovation. Now, what are the challenges that this process typically sees? So we've got challenges across all the three stages. When we look at discovery, the biggest challenge is the lack of right strategic direction. It can be a challenge, it can be a daunting task for the core management to be able to accurately understand or determine what are the key focus areas, what should be the key focus areas for the business. Though there are tools and techniques that can help a business to identify what could be the right strategic direction. And there's a scientific way of doing this. The second challenge is disconnected functions within the enterprise. So for a business to understand what is going to disrupt it in the next 5 to 10 years, there has to be a very coherent communication flowing across all the functions within an enterprise. Sales needs to talk to product, product needs to talk to marketing, marketing needs to talk to operations. Every function within the business has to be very coherent and in constant communication for the business to be able to identify the key focus areas. Again, there are tools and techniques by which this can be solved. The second stage, ideation, is fraught with a lot of challenges because ideation as a process is bottoms up. You as a business can only provide an environment where ideation can take place, but the final outcome of the ideation has to happen from the larger community. As I said in the previous slide, the community could be internal facing or it could be external facing. Now there are a number of challenges that one sees when it comes to ideation. The very first is disengaged employees. Any business that crosses a certain threshold of say beyond 500 to 1,000 employees, this disengagement starts setting in. People who are at the peripheries, people who are at the first ranks or the second ranks, they're typically so far away from the strategic direction of the business that they're not able to meaningfully contribute to it. The second problem is it's difficult to sustain continuous ideation because you're not asking your individuals or your employees to ideate in their context of day-to-day work, but the expectation is that these people will be ideate in addition to their day-to-day work. Any typical hardworking employee is so busy or so occupied with his or her work on a daily basis that it is difficult to, to kind of engage them to do continuous ideation. The third problem is it's extremely challenging to engage partners, customers, and an external ecosystem for crowdsourcing and problem solving. It's already difficult to be able to do that with your employees. Imagine how much more difficult it would be to engage somebody who's not part of your immediate ecosystem. And the fourth problem is that there's rarely a well-defined process for running ideation within a business. And this problem compounds as the size of the organization increases. And coming to the third stage, execution, even if you're able to identify, even if you're able to source a good number of ideas, identify which are the ideas which are worth taking forward, it can become challenging to assimilate these ideas or these proof of concepts into normal business development, because the same problem, everybody is so tied up with their day-to-day work that it could become difficult to pick up at the case. However, there are tools, techniques, methods to solve and address problems at each of these stages. Our discussion today will largely be in the purview of ideation, but it will touch upon the aspects of discovery and execution as well. So, jumping the track a bit, what is a hackathon and why it is relevant to the discussion today? So in the previous slides, I have discussed how an innovation process works, who are the key elements within the innovation process, largely the business and the individuals. Individuals could be the employees, partners, and the customers. And then there is this process of ideation and coming up with innovative ideas that the business can identify, and take to the next step. So where does a hackathon fit in? Before I can answer that, let's understand what's a hackathon. So this is the definition of a hackathon picked up from the link given below in the presentation. A hackathon is a week-long burst of creative energy. It can be a mix of software development, design, product validation, making prototypes, building apps, and we can solving something useful. This can take form artwork. And now let's definition into 3 parts. A hackathon is a weekend which are first is so the first part is hackathon is a weekend long burst of creative energy. The qualifier here is weekend long. A hackathon is typically a time-bound activity that can range from a few hours, say about 6 to 8 hours, and can go up to 24 hours or 48 hours, and in certain cases, even a week. And second is that's a burst of creative energy. The concept of creativity is centric to a hackathon. One does not do a hackathon to solve a day-to-day problem. One does a hackathon to solve something which the solution to which has been elusive to them for a long period of time. One tries to tackle a very interesting or a hard problem in an activity like hackathon. The second thing is that it says it could be a mix of software development, design, product validation, making prototypes, and so on. So the definition of a hackathon is pretty varied, and it is also cross-functional. Traditionally, hackathons have been associated largely with software development or engineers, but increasingly we are seeing a lot more cross-functional hackathons where one tries to engage, engineers engage with product, they engage with design, they engage with marketing, sales, essentially engaging with any or every vertical that is responsible for running a business, because you need to get varied opinions, varied flavors to be able to come up with a problem, to come up with a solution to a problem that a potential user or customer may be facing. And the whole objective of doing a hackathon is to bring something useful. Now, note that when we say bring something useful, we're not just talking about an not just talking about a piece of that comes out of it. The solution may not be a fully working prototype, but it should at least be a proof of concept. And the solution, as I said, it could be a product, it could be a service, it could even be a business model. So the definition of a hackathon is increasingly becoming diverse and multifaceted. So this is what a hackathon would look like. A lot of creative energy, a lot of enthusiasm on the floor, people collaborating, people talking to each other, and typically these hackathons happen from 24 to 48 hours. People are awake all night, hacking away on a particular problem. So let's dwell deeper as to why hackathons. So there are a couple of salient features of hackathons that kind of lend them very beautifully into the whole concept of innovation management. The first thing is that hackathons themselves, they create a culture of innovation. When one does a hackathon, they're essentially telling people that, hey, let's come together and solve problems. Let's come together and build solutions that we care about. Let's build solutions that make this world a better place. So the very tone, the very demeanor of a hackathon is about being innovative. The second thing is, and this touches upon the third part, the third aspect of innovation management, and that is execution. A hackathon, unlike an idea generating exercise, is not just limited to the process of generating ideas, but it also results in creation of proof of concepts. This could be, beta versions of products. It could be an example of a working model of say, a financial model, or it could be a proposal on how to execute a certain service. So it could be any of these. It could be a product, it could be a service, but it is something bigger than an idea. It is something more meaty. In certain hackathons, these proof of concepts are even validated on a small set of an end user to make them more relevant. So with these hackathons, we can actually tackle a small part of the execution exercise. Because when you look at a hackathon as a business owner, what you get out of it is not just an idea, but an actual working proof of concept, which is far easier to take into the business development process, in the product development process of the business. The third thing is that a hackathon gives a structured process around idea development. Now, in one of my previous slides, I have talked about how idea generation is difficult to sustain or continue over a longer period of time, essentially because it's difficult to come up with a structure around it. But hackathon, by its very nature, gives it a structured process. There's a time when you begin the hackathon, there's a duration during which you run it, and then you end it. There's a defined problem statement or a theme around which you're trying to solve problems, and you've got the right set of audience who's participating, who are able to solve that problem. So you're bringing all the key elements. You're bringing a restriction of time, you're bringing the right set of people together, and you're giving the right context to this activity. And this, in turn, results in very creative idea generation. And the fourth thing is that hackathons just democratize the process of contributing to innovation management. It just democratizes the process. Anybody and everybody within the organization can come in and contribute. And they can not only contribute an idea, they can contribute a proof of concept. And there's a saying in Facebook, let the code do the talking, which essentially means that instead of giving your idea or talking about your idea, build the prototype, show the product, and let it speak for itself. And that is far more powerful than just a few words around how somebody can do something. You're actually going 10 steps ahead and showing how it can be done. And with this, you are breaking away the chains of hierarchy. You're breaking away the chains of politics that exist in any business context. Because in this process, in this hackathon, there could be, somebody who's at the lowermost rung of the organization, but they have the opportunity and the voice to come up and say, hey, I have this idea, and this is how I think something like this can be done. So it just democratizes the whole process. So just to substantiate the whole point of a hackathon, let's look at the spoils of what Facebook has got from hackathons over the last 1 decade. Almost every major feature that we have come to love about Facebook has come from its hackathons. The like button was built in a hackathon. The timeline was conceptualized in hackathon. The chat, which has now morphed into a messenger and is leading the whole revolution of chatbots, came out of a hackathon. The hyperlays in Instagram came out of a hackathon. And there are tons of other features like video upload, mailing a postcard to your friends, even tagging people in comments. And what's most interesting about this is that this feature actually came from an intern who was working at Facebook. Full screen photographs and tons of other features have come out of hackathons. So the culture of hackathons is actually very critical or very tightly wound with the culture of Facebook. I think very recently in 2016, Facebook concluded its 50th hackathon since its inception. Every year, there are multiple hackathons that are running, and any engineer or any person within the company has the freedom to build whatever they like in the larger context of what Facebook cares about. So Facebook gives that freedom that you can, as long as you're solving the larger mission, you're related to the larger mission of what Facebook has, you can build anything and everything. And this freedom has resulted in all of those features. If Facebook had dictated or mandated that these are the only 10 things or 5 things that you can do, then probably none of these innovations or these inventions which were on the fringes would have come to the fore. So a company like Facebook, which has been touted to be one of the most innovative companies, is essentially driving its innovation on top of hackathons. So when one looks at as hackathon as part of their innovation strategy, there are some things that you need to take care of. The first is that it has to be a part of the culture. It cannot be an isolated thing that exists in the stratosphere that a bunch of people within the business are doing and nobody else cares about them. It has to be an essential part of the culture, and only then it can yield the kind of results that a company like Facebook has seen. It's kind of similar to the 80-20 rule that Google had, where Google said that, hey, and 20% of your time, you can do whatever you want to do. And a lot of interesting things have come out of that, even in Google. So that was part of their culture, like hackathons is part of culture for Facebook. So it has to be a very assimilated component of the overall culture that the company has. The second thing is that it cannot be a one-off event. It cannot be something that you do once in a year and you put up some banners and show and put some photos on the internal portal of the company, and that's about it. It cannot be a one-time event. It has to be done repeatedly. It has to be reinforced, and that kind of ties into one of the challenges that one faces with ideation, that it is difficult to sustain a continuous ideation process. And for that, something like hackathon becomes very handy, because if you do a hackathon every 1 month or every 2 months, you're again and again reinforcing the whole concept of ideation and innovation within the business. The third thing is that hackathon is not it's not something that you just wake up in the morning and start doing. There's a lot of structure that goes behind hosting a hackathon. There's a lot of thought that goes into it, and I will touch upon these aspects towards the later part of my presentation. But a hackathon has to be properly structured for you to be able to get benefits out of it. And last, the hackathons cannot be, as I said, they cannot be something that is happening in isolation. It has to be integrated with the larger business objectives, and that's where the whole concept of discovery ties into a hackathon. You cannot just wake up one morning and say, hey, let's do a hackathon, and somebody asks, what's this hackathon is about? Oh, I don't know, I just thought we'll do a hackathon. It doesn't work that way. You first need to discover as a business what you care about, and whenever you do a hackathon, that has to tie in to the purpose or the reason of doing that hackathon. So now I want to talk a little bit more about some of our customers who have successfully leveraged hackathons to create a culture of innovation, and they've also seen tangible ROI coming out of that. So Pitney Bowes is one of our customers, and over a duration of 24 months, they have done 19 different hackathons. They've had more than 1,000 people within the business participating, with more than 470 teams, and they had about 226 projects being built out of these hackathons. Now, what PB does is very interesting. They do a hackathon, they do multiple hackathons across different business units. So as I said in the previous slide, you can't just do a random hackathon. They have tied their hackathons to various business units within their business, and that's where they do these hackathons. And the most interesting thing is that about 10% of these projects that were built in these hackathons, 19 hackathons over a period of 2 years, have been actually taken to market. More than 20 projects have gone into one or the other customer-facing product. And that's not the only advantage of doing a hackathon for a business like PB. It also has a host of other benefits. For example, it allows cross-functional technical teams to participate on a single platform. So PB's teams, tech teams, and non-tech teams as well are distributed across various geographies. So it allows people from different functions to come together, collaborate, ideate on a single platform. And secondly, it has enabled exchange of knowledge between multiple teams across the globe. So, probably 2 years back, what the India team was doing was probably not known to a large majority of people in the US working at PB. But with a platform like this, but with a process like this, there is a constant exchange of knowledge that takes place between various teams across the globe. Another example of a company leveraging hackathons is Nutanix. Nutanix does about 2 hackathons a year, so they have a slightly lesser volume approach, but their hackathons, they put a lot of effort, a lot of thought into both the hackathons that they do. These hackathons take place across 4 different offices in 3 different countries. In the last one that they did, 500 people participated. They had 130 teams, and about 100 submissions came out of that hackathon. And within a short duration of just 3 months, 4 projects that were built in that hackathon were deployed. So the quality of projects that were built in this exercise was so good that they were able to pick 4 out of those projects and integrate within the normal business product development process and deploy it. All of this in a short duration of 3 months. The hackathons span over 4 days, and there are a variety of things that they do during those hackathons. There are jam sessions, there are fun sessions that are happening between these hackathons. There are cross-team collaboration. What Nutanix also does very interesting is that it does not restrict its hackathons to just the engineering or the product team. It actually invited its sales team or its sales engineering team, essentially the people who are out there in the field selling to the customers, to come in and interact with the engineering team, and hence resulting in much richer end projects being built, because the engineers who are typically slightly far away from the end user were able to get a perspective of what the customer actually wants, what the user actually wants, by interacting with these sales engineers. And the whole aspect of running this across 4 different offices helped them create a global culture where people from US were collaborating with people from Australia and India, and they were forming teams together, working on their hacks for over a period of 4 days. In continuation of the 2 case studies that I've shown, I would like to touch upon some of the use cases of hackathons. Hackathons can be leveraged for, of course, as we've discussed, they can be used for generating ideas on business-focused themes. Hackathons can also be used for solving specific problems. So some of the hackathons can have a problem statement where one says, how does I solve this specific problem? Now, note that the problem statement has to be worthy of a hackathon. And when I say that, what I mean by that is that the problem statement has to be hard enough, it has to be open-ended enough that a bunch of people can come together and think of multiple kind of innovative solutions to solving that specific problem. So if you try and put a problem statement that there's a solution for which is already well known, for example, how do I build a mobile app that probably allows me to share a file with another person, the solution for something like that is already out there in the market. This is not a suitable problem for opening up to a hackathon. But on the other hand, let's look at an interesting problem that one of our customers tried to tackle through hackathon, not in the internal users domain, but using an external audience. It is a cloud telephony company which had samples of voice of conversations between people. So they had 10,000 voice conversations between 2 people, and they wanted to identify what is the emotion of people who are talking. Like, are they happy? Are they sad? Are they excited? So it's a fairly open-ended problem that requires a lot of creative thinking. And this was opened up to an audience of developers on HackerEarth. And they were able to crowdsource 2 highly accurate machine learning algorithms that were able to identify what's the emotion of people who are talking in this conversation. Moving on, hackathons are a wonderful tool to encourage cross-team collaboration. Every customer that we've worked with understands and appreciates this benefit of running hackathons. It essentially brings people from, not only from different geographies, but people from different teams to come together and tackle common problems. Hackathons can also allow you to discover problems or issues affecting the business. So a hackathon could simply be about what are the problems that a particular a consumer might face from this product. So just trying to ask people to hack into the product and identify what could be the issues or what can be done better. Hackathons are also an interesting way to understand the pulse of the organization. And when I say pulse of the organization, understand what the organization cares about. Because when people are given the freedom to do what they want, that's when you'll get to know what they care about. And as a business, it's very important for you to understand what your employees and what the organization at a large cares about. For example, you as a business may be thinking that optimizing, let's say you're an e-commerce workflow company business who operates in the supply chain management, and you are predominantly focusing as a business on just the efficiency of the business processes. But what if the actual problem is the experience that an end consumer faces as part of that whole process? So you as a business are only concerned about solving the operational efficiencies, but the actual thing that's affecting your whole business is the end experience that you deliver to a consumer. Now that is something that can be difficult for a business to discover when there are only 10 people who are sitting in the boardroom and thinking about what is critical to the business. But this is something that people on the fringes can feel, people on the fringes can identify. And they can, if given a voice, if given a place where they can talk about this, they can come back and come up with, highlight these issues. And lastly, it creates a culture of creativity, agility, and collaboration. As I said before, a hackathon is a time-bound event. You've only given 24 to 48 hours to come up with an end product. So there's this whole concept of agility. Imagine the agile process that we follow, which typically spans across 2 weeks in any agile organization, compressing that into 24 hours. That's how fast, that's how quick it is. And it's all about getting out of the comfort zone, solving different problems. So the element of creativity is inbuilt. And one cannot create or ideate without collaborating. Moving on, this brings towards the end of the webinar. And I want to talk about some things that one should be careful of while hosting a hackathon. The first thing that you need to do is that you need to ask the right question. And when I say you need to ask the right question as a business, as a hackathon organizer, you need to ask the right question. You need to ask, what is this hackathon about? You need to set the right context. You need to tell the audience that, hey, our business is facing these challenges. It could be around operational efficiency, it could be about customer experience, it could be about delivery, it could be about anything, right? You need to give that context to the audience for them to be able to come up with the right solutions. So you need to ask the right questions so you can set the right context. The second thing, as a business owner, it is your responsibility to make these hackathons customer or user centric. So you need to provide the right amount of information, knowledge to the participants before or during the hackathon, so that they can understand what's the user journey. They can understand what does a user go through while they're consuming a product or a service. What are the problems that the user is trying to solve through this product or a service? What does that user care about? And this can be done through collecting and presenting data through surveys. It could be done through primary user research, all the kind of things that you would do to understand your customer while you are building a product. The same amount of information or knowledge should also be made available to the hackathon participants so that they can empathize with the end customer, because at the end of the day, the products that they're going to build should be about the end customer. Third, you need to create an environment of creativity. And when I say that, you can't put people in cubicles and expect them to collaborate and come up with innovative ideas. You need to create an environment where there is energy on the floor, where people are talking to each other, where there's a vibe of enthusiasm that's flowing through the entire place where the hackathon is taking place. And as you would have seen in the image that I shared with you in one of the slides, It's all about having that fun environment while hosting a hackathon. The fourth thing that you need to do is that you need to limit the limits. You cannot put too many restrictions. You cannot curb a person or box the person into a very well-defined framework and say, hey, you can only create or ideate within this framework. This defeats the whole purpose of creativity. This defeats the whole purpose of innovation. You have to let people be free. You have to give them the freedom to think, to be crazy, and only then you're going to get some of the most innovative ideas coming from the audience. The more structure you put into it, the more you try to engineer the thought process, the less the less useful will be the output. Fifth, ensure that your hackathon is deeply cross-functional. You need to include all the stakeholders. As I said, not just the engineering or product team, you need to include the business owners, you need to include the business stakeholders, you need to include the sales team, your customer support team, customer experience team. Everybody who's a part of this business should in some form or way be a stake or should be interacting or be part of this hackathon. It has to be cross-functional for you to get good output out of the hackathon. And finally, and the most important point is that you need to follow through. A hackathon is not just a fun event that you do just because a hackathon is a keyword, is a buzzword. You need to follow through the projects or the ideas that come out of that hackathon. And all our successful customers understand the importance of following through. You need to take those ideas, nurture those ideas, and give them a business oversight so that these ideas can convert into something more meaningful and eventually go and affect your top line. Because the only way to continuously increase your top line revenue is through constant innovation. And constant innovation can only happen when you decide to manage the process of innovation. When you understand what is discovery, when you understand what's ideation and execution, and when you put in right processes and systems in place like hackathons to deliver that process. So with this, I come to the end of my webinar. I would like to open up for Q&A and encourage the audience to ask questions. So Jasper has asked, do you organize hackathons yourself, or do clients make use of the platform and they organize it themselves? So we do both. We organize hackathons for our clients, and we also provide them the platform. And if they decide to manage the process for running the hackathon on their own, then they can do it on their own. We can also pick up various aspects of running a hackathon. For example, if you are running a hackathon in external audience, we can provide you the platform and we can provide you the outreach to the external audience. In case of internal hackathons, our customers prefer doing managing the hackathons on their own, because that's there are a lot of IP issues about which they're concerned. So they would like to maintain the IP with them, and they don't want external audience to be privy to what's happening within a business. But having said that, we do both. The second question is from Zainab. What is the difference between a hackathon and a sprint? So technically, from if I were to look at a definition of the word, both sprint and hackathon refer to a short burst of an exercise where one comes up with, one builds out a product or does something creative. Over a period of time, sprint has stuck with the definition of within the purview of product management or product development, whereas hackathon has diversified or opened up into various domains. So as I was covering in the presentation, a hackathon could be around a product, it could be around a service, it could be around anything. So technically speaking, both of them refer to the same kind of thing, but functionally they have become different over a period of time. So the third question is from Philippe. The question is, you are mainly talking about technical hackathons. What is the difference of hacking social problems with non-techies? So yes, my presentation did have a flavor of technical hackathons, but hackathons are not limited to just technical problem statements or technical concepts. They could be just a hackathon around inviting people to, like you said, take a jab at some of these social problems. So there's essentially no difference in the process. There is no difference in the things that you need to take care of while hosting a hackathon. The whole process and the philosophy is the same. Just the output of the hackathon would be different. In case of a technical audience, what you would get is a product or a tech product that comes out of it. For hacking social problems with non-techies, you'll probably come up with some white papers or a model on how a problem can be solved. So with this, we end the webinar. I strongly request the participants to take the poll or the survey that is at the end of the webinar. This will allow us to understand the quality, how you like the webinar, and what can we do better for future. Thank you.